Thank you so much for the opportunity to present our oncology strategy at this occasion. So let me maybe first start with giving you a brief history on why we launched an oncology strategy. We sat together a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, thinking around, or 4 years ago, maybe thinking about this idea, and it all started from the problem, from cancer. We're all touched by this. We see it claims many lives, and we were thinking, can we as investors also have an impact on this disease? Can we create a vehicle to fight back against this disease? And we pretty rapidly came to the conclusion, yes, we can do this. We can build a portfolio of companies that can both help patients bring new solutions and at the same time provide an interesting return for investors. There's actually a lot going on in the oncology space. You can build a very well balanced portfolio of companies that are commercial, but also companies that have very interesting emerging therapies. You see that there are a lot of new drug approvals in oncology. And in addition to this, we wanted to do something more. We wanted to have more impact than just investing in the best possible companies in this space. We also wanted to donate part of the management fee, of the Candriam management fee, so not of the assets, but of the Candriam income, to charities, and charities that have a very strong research focus. And why is that? We are absolutely convinced that if you want to win the fight against this disease, you also need to understand the disease, and we'll need more academic research to come up with new ways to fight the disease and new ways that then can eventually be exploited by companies to bring new treatment to patients. And this is something I don't think I need to convince you of. Cancer, oncology is a very big problem. It's the #1 killer, or the #2 killer in the world. It's something, and the middle figure is something that always shocks me if I see it. We all have a 40% lifetime risk of being directly confronted with the disease. That means that nobody is either directly or indirectly untouched by this problem. And also the figure on the right is, I think, a very important number. It's a question I sometimes get. Look, it's very interesting, but what will you do if somebody comes up with a cure against cancer? And obviously my first reaction will be, I will be very happy that this problem is solved. I'll be very happy as a human being that this is a problem that we no longer need to worry about. I'll be very happy as an investor because I'm sure if that company ever exists, we'll be invested in that company and we'll make a lot of money for our shareholders, for our investors. But thirdly, unfortunately, and that relates to the number that is there on the slide, I don't think that will happen. Cancer is a very complicated disease and we'll need a lot of different solutions, a lot of different treatments, and in the end, also a series of different companies that work on the solution for this problem, and you'll need many of them. It's a problem, and it's like many healthcare strategies you see, and as many diseases that they come with age. It's no different for cancer. That makes also that because of the demographics of the population, cancer deaths and cancer incidents are projected to dramatically increase. But at the same time, what we see is also that there is a lot of innovation in this space. There are more than 1,500 drugs currently in development for the treatment of cancer. And this is also very important to emphasize. It's not only about drugs. I mean, this fund is partially invested in pharma and biotech companies, yes, but there's also life science equipment. There is the equipment that you need to understand this disease, to do research. I'm thinking about companies like Thermo Fisher, like Danaher. A second thing that we believe, and that I think will be critical in the future, if you really want to improve outcome for patients, you'll need better diagnosis. And better diagnosis is especially earlier diagnosis in a very simple way. And there I think liquid biopsies, simple blood tests could make a very big difference. And this is not science fiction. There are companies, working on this, and companies actually putting out very interesting data to come up with such blood tests to detect cancer. A third aspect and a third series of companies, once you have diagnosed the cancer, it's important to understand that cancer, to know why does this person has this cancer, what is the driver behind this. And for that you need genetic sequencing, and you need companies like NYLI that can provide you this affordable sequencing, and that can tell you, look, you have this cancer, this is the driver. And the next thing that comes, and obviously, is what is the most appropriate treatment. And very often the answer will be radiation or surgery. And also there again, there are a couple of very interesting companies. There's a lot of improvements. Basically what it comes down to is you want to limit the collateral damage. You want to make sure that your radiation is very precise and is only hitting the tumor and no other tissues. And then obviously finally, and I think that's on top of most people's mind when you think about the fight against cancer, obviously also better drugs are part of the solution, and those come obviously from pharma companies like AstraZeneca is a very good example, but also from emerging biotech companies that have very, very interesting pipelines in oncology. And as you can imagine, this is a highly specialized space, and in such a space we're absolutely convinced that you need to think as a scientist, that you need to think as a doctor. Basically the question that we always ask is, if I was a patient, would I want to take this treatment? And we are strongly convinced if the answer is yes, this is the kind of treatments that doctors will prescribe, that patients will want to get, and that will eventually generate the sales and returns for investors. But to do that, you're obviously best off by having scientists and medical people in the team. So that's why we built this team, and it's a real honor to work with those people here that all have either a lot of experience in finance, a scientific background, or both. So collectively there is over 60 years of experience both in finance and in science and medicine. So that is absolutely key to our philosophy, have people on board that know this from inside out. Obviously, it's next to understanding the science, it's obviously important to think about portfolio construction, to think about constructing a balanced portfolio. And we look basically at all listed equity. So this is very important. This is a strategy that's highly liquid. It's only invested in companies that are on the stock market. So the first thing we do is we do a thematic screening. We have an AI-driven search engine called AlphaSense that can give us all companies that are exposed to the thematic, that are involved in the fight against cancer. And if you look at those, you end up with about 500 companies. And those represent a market capitalization of $6.2 trillion US. So it's a pretty substantial, broad and diverse investment universe. Those we will filter them, and we will filter them based on essentially ESG criteria. So you're very much focused on patients, doing good for patients. And so we look at the social impact, we look at companies to include, we look how did we improve patient outcome. And then you think about the quality of the clinical data that they present. Is this coming from good academic centers, from good hospitals, the data? Is it peer reviewed? How much impact does it have for patients? Is it something that is truly a new mechanism of action, a new way of tackling the cancer? Those things will typically have a larger impact. Obviously, it's not only about the science. You need good people to execute on the science. So you need people that have experience in this process. So that's something we highly value, experience of management in bringing novel treatments to the market. And then obviously there's also a dedicated ESG team that checks if there are no controversies around those companies. So you apply those filters, we in the end end up with a reduced investment universe of about 300 companies that still represent an aggregated market capitalization of 4.8 trillion US dollars. And then those will eventually analyze in depth and come up with a portfolio that is typically a conviction portfolio between 55 and 85 lines. The assessment, basically, it's very much a mix of a financial assessment, but obviously combined with a scientific analysis. And the sources typically that we use is outcome of scientific conferences, scientific publications, obviously what the companies present themselves. No story is completely black and white, so always a discussion with management, and then obviously we check or view what the management tells us with key opinion leaders, with doctors who are in the field actually treating patients. We check with them how they see the value of novel treatments, and that obviously all need to come at a good valuation, at something where we can still generate a nice return for our investors. And very briefly, the framework that we actually use to do this is also what the pharma company AstraZeneca is using to assess their own pipeline and when they do acquisitions. So the most important thing is the product itself. You need to believe that the product is a good product, and for this we have a full series of criteria that we always very disciplined and vet. That's the most critical. But obviously, such a new treatment comes into an existing treatment paradigm. So it's very important to look also at the therapeutic landscape, what is already available. And we are investors, obviously, the market potential needs to be there and needs to be sufficiently large. What we typically see is if the potential of the market is below 300 million, it's typically not feasible to create a profitable company. So that's very important. Quality of management, as described before, the scientific experience is very important, but also being able to manage investor expectations, communication are obviously very important features. And financial of the company can be very diverse, obviously. Looking at commercial companies, you can do that in a more classical way. You can easily do DCF valuations. You can look at measures as free cash flow yields. And that is part of the portfolio. And today, roughly 70% is invested in highly profitable companies that are highly profitable today. Another 30% is currently invested in companies that have emerging products that we think will be very interesting in the future, but currently still need to rely on cash from investors to develop those products. So it's very important, obviously, that you believe in the product, and then that companies do have the financials to come to the next step in the development and eventually reach the market. This is something that we think is very important to also support basic research in oncology. So that's why we give 10% of our management fee to charities, and charities that have a very important focus on research. And we do that in every single country where we have distribution. The management fee coming out of that country also goes to patients and to research in that country. So thinking about how innovation comes and how improvements of patients come, this is an example of a blood cancer, liquid tumor called multiple myeloma. And what you see here on this slide is that in the 70s, there was very little treatments, only chemotherapy. And then slowly, you see novel drugs coming. And what's especially important, you see drugs coming with a novel way to attack the cancer. And the more of those drugs you have, the more novel ways you have to stop that cancer, the better the outcome for patients become. So here you see an example where the survival for patients has been increased by 72 months, so which is a pretty substantial amount. And there's more coming in this disease, and multiple drugs that you see on this slide are also mega blockbuster drugs. For example, Revlimid is a drug that is currently selling 13 billion. Another example is the drug Darzalex is currently selling more than 6 billion US dollars. So all very, very large drugs. And some of the drugs coming there, like the BCMAs, are also things that we anticipate that will be blockbuster drugs selling multiple billions, and also at the same time improving the outcome for patients substantially. And this is something that we also look at in our strategy. In the end, what counts is obviously that we generate a good return for investors, but also that we are involved in those treatments that reach patients, that eventually get approved. I think is also a good measure of our success to judge how well our investment process works. And you see over the years, with the full years that the funds exist. So we launched the fund in November 2018. So 2019 was the first full year. The one thing you see is that overall drug approvals has been relatively high, and oncology has always taken a share of roughly 1/3 in that. And we have always been involved in the vast majority of those approvals with our portfolio. It's a space also where you see a lot of M&A. So typically, what we see is small companies are really well equipped to develop novel drugs. They have teams that are laser focused on drug development. A pharma company is typically, some of them have very good pipelines, but a pharma company is especially strong at registering a drug over the globe in all countries in the world, and has a very strong commercial presence everywhere. And that's also why you see those nice premiums that are paid, and obviously that's something that helps the strategy well. But I will say this is something that we see as the cherry on the cake. We never invest in a company because we think it will be acquired. We invest in a company because we believe in the company. We believe that the product and the valuation is interesting, and that the company in itself can become successful. But sometimes the result is that before that happens, or on the way, that a pharma company picks those companies up at very nice premiums, and that's an additional nice return for our investors. So if you look at the performance of the funds since inception in 2018, so we're well ahead of the global markets and the MSCI World and MSCI World Healthcare. So what you see recently, so the fund is balanced between large cap companies that are more tilted to value, the pharma names, and especially, but also has some of the emerging companies, emerging biotech companies, and that is triggering somewhat more difficult performance year to date, where we have seen a very much risk of behavior in the market. It's something, I mean, the portfolio is balanced. It's somewhat more shifted to the large caps, but it's something we fundamentally believe that good products, good drugs will in the end be picked up and reach patients. If such type of market continues, what you typically see is that also pharma companies step in and pick up those companies at the lower valuations. And this is why we believe that this market has a lot of potential, continued potential. It's a market that is projected by McKinsey to grow at an average of 10% a year, driven by just the fact that the unmet need is there. There's a huge increase, unfortunately, in cancer incidence. There are a lot of novel treatments coming. There's a lot of innovation coming. There's a lot of technological advancement. And at the same time, you see it's also a very rewarding space. I mean, if you can develop a product, if you can save lives, that is something that also governments and also insurance is willing to pay a good price for. So in the end, it's an investment that with a very good return, typically, oncology products. So how do we see the future of cancer treatment? And that's also basically behind the way we invest. So this is our ultimate goal, and that we hope to support this also with our investments. That a cancer patient in the future, one will be the cancer will be spotted very early. The second thing is that we will understand, we will be able to profile the tumor, we'll understand what causes it. There will be hopefully artificial intelligence that also then assists the doctor to propose the most appropriate treatment protocol for that patient. And given all the developments, this might become pretty complicated to do for a human being just alone without the help of software. Probably because the cancer was luckily spotted early, the best way will be to remove it, hopefully with high-tech equipment that can do this very precise with limited collateral damage. But if you want to be sure that cancer is gone to the very last cell, you'll probably need some kind of personalized combination therapy to make sure that you remove all the cancer cells, and hopefully again with limited collateral damage. And then in the end, hopefully the patients will be cancer-free, but some monitoring via blood tests will be required to make sure that if the cancer would return, you can act on it very quickly. So I'll maybe end with this slide. This is what we hope to achieve, and in all those different buckets, we are currently investing. So I'm very happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you very much indeed for the presentation. Okay, first question is, what is the average size of the companies in the portfolio, and how small do you go? Is there a minimum? What's the smallest company you'd invest in?
Okay, that's a very, very good question. So I don't know the average size, but typically, so today, 70% of the portfolio is invested in large caps, and by large caps I mean companies that have a market capitalization of over $25 billion US. And how small do we go? So in theory, we can invest in a company from the moment it has a market capitalization of over $100 million US. So that's a relatively small size. It's a bit arbitrary, but we put it there because what we think is very important is that you have good clinical data before you invest. We don't invest in concepts. We want to see validation of that concept in the clinic. And in reality, you don't find that in companies that don't have a market capitalization of over $100 million US.
More questions about the portfolio. What's the geographical split, and do you own any UK companies?
Yeah, so a very good question again. So the geographical split looks very much like an MSCI World Healthcare, so which is then dominantly US. It's roughly 60% US. And then the rest is split over Asia, which is mostly Japan and Europe. And yes, we do own also companies in the UK. In fact, our largest position is even UK pharma company. It's AstraZeneca, a company that we very strongly believe in. I mean, they have a very, very good portfolio in oncology, and they have a lot of very interesting both commercial assets that are growing at a very rapid pace, but they also have one of the most interesting pipelines in the entire pharma space.
Next question is about a bit more corporate. Candriam, can you tell us a little bit more about who Candriam are? I guess, and how the ethos of the firm and the size and structure.
Yeah, so Candriam is an investment manager based with offices based all over the world, but most of the management is done in Brussels and Paris. We do have offices in UK and London also. We are a subsidiary of New York Life, so the UK investment firm. Assets under management are currently roughly about 150 billion, and we do have a very long-term track record in the healthcare. So we launched this oncology fund 3 years ago, but we have a biotechnology fund for multiple decades that also 1.5 billion in assets. This oncology fund, by the way, currently has also 1.8 billion assets under management. And we also have a global healthcare fund that we're running already also for over 20 years. So at the firm, there's a lot of experience in healthcare, and all strategies together today are roughly a little bit over $4 billion in assets.
There's a question about the how you can buy the fund. It is available on the AJBL Invest platform. So if you are a customer, you'll be able to invest via the platform. Going back to the portfolio question about portfolio turnover, as I guess reasonably new fund, do you have much portfolio turnover? Do you have investments that you've held since the inception?
Yeah, so the turnover of the portfolio roughly is 30%. So the name turnover is fairly limited. So the way we look at it, we try to find good assets. And then as long as the data goes with those assets and as long as the valuation works, we stick to those assets. It's more a kind of buy and hold strategy, but obviously, I mean, sometimes you see data popping up from a competitor that make assets less interesting. Sometimes data go against you, and then you have to act, obviously. And the same holds for valuation. And we are investors. If companies cross our price target, we sell, obviously. So that results in practice in a turnover of roughly 30%.
A final question, one from me, Servaas, and it kind of relating to the slide on the screen at the moment. Is there any particular, what gets you most excited in terms of development, whether it be diagnosis, early diagnosis, AI, drugs? Is there an area that you're particularly excited about?
Oh, there are many, and on all fronts there are highly exciting things. The one thing I personally believe that will be a major breakthrough is earlier diagnosis. You do see that if you can detect the cancer early, and we can do that, for example, in colorectal cancer today. The way you do it is usually via stool analysis, which is not very convenient way to do it. But if you detect it early, your outcome is dramatically different. And if you imagine if you could do that for like a cancer that is currently very deadly, like pancreatic cancer, if you spot that very early, I'm absolutely convinced you would dramatically change the outcome. But today there is no test to do that. We do see it in development. We do see companies in that space that basically look in your blood, look for markers for the cancer in the blood. It's not something we'll have on the market tomorrow, but I can see that in 3 years from now, we'll have maybe blood tests for colorectal cancer. And in 5 to 10 years from here, I think we'll have those blood tests for multiple cancers. So there are early tests ongoing. Data looks promising, but you have to consider here, it's very important that you don't make people unnecessarily worried. So you need to also, then in technical terms, you need to be very specific with that test. If you say somebody has cancer, you cannot be wrong. If you miss a couple of cancers, it's bad, obviously, but you would miss them anyhow. You wouldn't spot them that early. But the most important is that you don't create unnecessary worry in the patient. If you tell somebody he has cancer, you need to be absolutely certain that the cancer is there. And there's a bit of work to be done, but we're getting there. We see a lot of improvement.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening and introducing the fund to us.
Yeah, thank you so much for the questions and the opportunity.